Welcome back, everyone. This is Isaac with 90s Nerd Media. I'm back on the couch with part two of my WrestleMania review. So we're going to get into Sunday night. This is part two of WrestleMania 41. And so, of course, Saturday night had a lot of great matches and a lot of big moments. So Sunday had a lot to live up to. If you haven't already checked it out, go check out part one of my review. I gave my reactions and my ratings for night one. So now we're going to get into night two. I'm going to give you a rundown of everything that happened and then my rating at the end. So let's get into it. Okay, so we start the night off with the triple threat match between Io Sky, Rhea Ripley, and Bianca Belair for the Women's World Championship belt. And this was honestly one of the best opening matches in WrestleMania history, and really just one of the best matches in WrestleMania history, period. I think this was an instant classic. I think all three women put on the show tonight. This was a fast paced match from the beginning. All three women were kind of locked in, and the chemistry was great. They were going back and forth. And then we had this whole dynamic with like Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair kind of ignoring Io and, fighting each other and kind of knocking her out the ring. And that's kind of been the consistent thread between these three leading up to WrestleMania. And they kind of played out again in this matchup. And so we saw Io Sky insert herself back into the match and showed that she wasn't going to be ignored. And so whenever Bianca and Rhea would kind of get into it, Io would come in and she would take over. And all three women just kind of kept going back and forth. And we had a bunch of false finishes, a bunch of kickouts, and we had all three women be able to hit their finishers. But ultimately, Io Sky ended up picking up the win after she hit, her moonsault off the top ropes. And she just showed that not only did she deserve to be in this match, but that she's also a deserving champion and that she's one of the best wrestlers on the roster, period. And I think this is one of those matches that people are going to be talking about for a long time as a classic. And this just got the night off to such a great start. So the second match of the night was the Sin City Street Fight between Damian Priest and Drew McIntyre. And this was a really fun matchup. This is one of the better builds leading into Mania. Of course, these two had a long history with each other, going back and forth, bickering with each other, fighting, attacking each other from behind. And so this one, we had a lot of animosity between the two, and just making it a street fight allowed them to use all these weapons and tables and everything else to beat the hell out of each other. But this was a very intense matchup too. And I feel like they both put on a good show. Damian Priest, he's really elevated his game the last couple of years, and he showed that he's really like a standout player. And Drew McIntyre, obviously, he's been a former world champion, and just in a one-on-one matchup, it's really hard to take Drew down. He's so big and like strong, but he's also agile. He has speed and everything else. So I just feel like him and Damian Priest are always going to be a good matchup. And tonight it was no different. They really utilized the weapons well. The table spot outside the ring was crazy. Damian Priest getting knocked into the tables off the ropes. And then the chair spot with him catching the Claymore into the chairs and Drew McIntyre picking up the win. It was a very fun matchup, and I think these two put on one of the better matches of the night. So the next match was the Fatal 4-Way for the Intercontinental Championship, and this was between Braun Breaker, Penta, Dirty Dom Mysterio, and Finn Balor. And so this was the third match in a row that I would say was really great. We had three great matches back to back to back. And so with this one, Braun Breaker came in as the champion, but you obviously had Dirty Dom and Finn Balor from the Judgment Day, so they were kind of working as a team, but you always had that feeling like they weren't going to be able to stay alive for too long. There's been a lot of tension between Dirty Dom and Finn Balor, and that ended up showing itself out during the match. But overall, just all four men showed why they're four of the best competitors. Penta, he's been on fire since he's come into WWE, and for a moment it looked like he may actually get the win, but we end up having Dirty Dom hit the frog splash on Finn Balor to pick up the win. And then the surprise, like the crowd was fully behind Dirty Dom from the beginning since he came out. So he's made that kind of heel turn to going to babyface, and it was more of an organic thing. I don't even think the WWE were expecting him to get this kind of reaction, but the crowd was fully behind him and they were cheering this win, and it's honestly like a good moment to see for somebody like Dom, who he's a wrestling lifer. He's been around WWE his whole life, obviously with his dad being one of the legends of WWE. So seeing him get that moment was really special. But just overall, all four men really showed that this was one of the better matches of the night. So happy for Dom, and this was a fun moment and a great match. So for the next match, we had Randy Orton come out to the ring, and of course, this was his 20th WrestleMania. So he said, he doesn't have an opponent for tonight due to Kevin Owens having to pull out because of injury. So he kind of opened up a challenge to anyone to come out and fight him because he needed an opponent, and everyone's kind of anticipating, trying to guess who it was going to be, and it ended up being Joe Hendry, who has been on WWE programming before and is the current TNA champion. So that was a bit of a shocker. I don't know if anyone had him on their card as far as coming out to fight Randy Orton, but it was a fun little moment. I wouldn't really classify this as a full match. It was only like a couple of minutes long, and everyone knew that Joe Hendry was going to eat that RKO, so it didn't really feel like a real match, but it was a fun moment nonetheless. And Joe Hendry is super over with the crowd, so they were really into his entrance and singing his music, and they cheered when he got the RKO and popped for that. So it was a fun little moment, but I don't know if I would actually classify this as a real match. Okay, so for the next match, we had AJ Styles versus Logan Paul, and honestly, the build for this matchup wasn't great. There was no championships or anything on the line. The story of Logan Paul and AJ Styles kind of clashing, it didn't really land. There wasn't that much animosity, and as much as the WWE wants to like lean on this narrative of Logan Paul being this hated heel who everyone despises, I think there's just like more apathy towards him from WWE fans, like where they just really don't care about Logan Paul and they don't want him to be in the WWE. So it kind of played out during this match. The match itself was fine. It wasn't bad by any means. Both of these wrestlers are super talented in the ring, but for some reason the chemistry didn't click. This was more of a like slower paced matchup than you would have expected from these two. And there were some great spots. Logan Paul hitting the lion salt, and them trading style clashes back and forth. And Logan Paul ultimately picked up the win. But as far as the crowd, they weren't really into it, and I just don't think that they care enough about Logan Paul to give him a reaction either way. So this match was fine, but not great by any means. So next we had a championship match with the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez versus Lyra Valkyria, and Bayley had to be pulled from the match due to injury, so there was a mystery partner coming out to team up with Lyra. And when the music hit, we saw that it was Becky Lynch, and the fans went crazy. It's been like over a year since Becky has been on WWE TV, and so obviously everyone's excited to see her back. And her and Liv Morgan obviously have a history together. They've gone back and forth several times over the years, and they have a really heated rivalry. And then you have the whole connection between Lyra and Becky, who come from the same country, and Becky has been like a mentor to her. So that was a fun surprise, and the match itself was pretty good. Obviously, the crowd was hot for Becky, and once she got in the ring, she kind of took over, and she looked like she hadn't missed any time off, and she, picked right up where she left off. And her and Lyra ended up picking up the win and becoming the new champions. So that was a fun moment and definitely a surprise. And I think it probably elevated what this match was going to be. As much as I like Bayley, there wasn't much of a build up to that match, so they needed to add something to it to really get people excited about it. So bringing back Becky definitely did that, and I'm excited to see what her and Lyra do as tag team champions. Okay, so finally we finish off night two of WrestleMania with the main event, which was John Cena versus Cody Rhodes for the WWE Championship. And I do think they did a good job of building up this matchup leading into WrestleMania. Obviously, this is going to be John Cena's last WrestleMania ever, so they wanted him to go out in the main event. And, he said he was going to retire with the belt as the last real champion. And you had Cody, who said he needed to win, not just for himself and the fans, but to protect the legacy of the belt. So there was a lot of hype going into this matchup. And I think the match itself was pretty good. Obviously, it was a slower pace match. I think that was a deliberate choice, by John Cena. He wanted to slow things down, but we still had a couple of big moments. I think he hit 3 or 4 AAs on Cody Rhodes, one from the top rope. And so there was a lot of back and forth, but I think John Cena, he purposely slowed this down. He made it a drag out fight. He didn't want to give his fans, the enjoyment of seeing like a fast paced match, because he's been on this mission to ruin wrestling, as he calls it. And so the matchup itself was pretty good. But then we all knew that something else was going to happen during this matchup. Somebody was going to come out, somebody was going to interfere. So it kind of felt like we were all just waiting to see like how this was going to end. And then we saw that Travis Scott ended up coming out, and he slowly made his way down to the ring took his time, and then he ended up getting involved in the matchup. And so once the referee was knocked out, Travis Scott got in the ring. He ended up getting a crossroads from Cody Rhodes, but this allowed John Cena to attack Cody with the belt and ended up picking up the win. And so the ending of this match was, I think, disappointing. I think most people were kind of shocked that that's how the match ended. Everyone's just kind of looking around like, that's it. And I honestly think that they kind of fumbled with this one. All the hype leading up into this matchup, for it to end that way with Travis Scott being such a big part of it and being like the main reason, the main catalyst for John Cena winning, it just left a bad taste in everybody's mouth, especially after such a, great weekend. We had so many great matches. We had a bunch of instant classics. And for the main event of night two to end like that, just due to Travis Scott's interference and nothing else, that kind of was a bummer. But I think overall, I would give this WrestleMania a B. I think that, main event with John Cena and Cody Rhodes definitely took a little bit off of the score. Otherwise, it was a pretty fun weekend. I think everyone, did pretty well for themselves. We had a bunch of standout matches. We had a bunch of title changes. The fun weekend overall, despite the ending, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what happens, the fallout from everything. We have to see what happens with Roman and Paul Heyman and that whole situation. So I'm definitely looking forward to the fallout, and I think this was a fun weekend, and definitely check out more of my wrestling reviews coming up.